sure we can convince Biz to put his presentation on DocStock and then tweet out that link to everybody, which would be kind of cool. So we're going to spend the next 17 minutes together. We're going to talk about how to persuade people. And my goal is, in that time, I think I can help you get more of the things you want, more often, and help other people get the things that they want also. And I've kind of been a student of studying persuasion my whole life. I've been fascinated about how political leaders and business leaders and religious leaders and just the most influential people you meet actually persuade other people. And I've studied those lessons. I've written them down. I've tried to apply them in my own life. When I was a teenager, I actually used to do crisis hotline counseling for people that were suicidal and were calling in this 1-800 number right before they thought they might take their own life. Later on, I went on to be the student body president of 2 different universities. For a brief period of time after college, I actually was a stage hypnotist and was certified in hypnosis and something called neuro-linguistic programming. And I used it to try to understand how to motivate people to do things. I then went on to start DocStock my last year of grad school and raised a couple $1 million, having never really raised money before, started a company like that. And now DocStock's one of the top 500 most trafficked sites on the internet. About 20 million people a month come there. And so I'm going to share the lessons that I've used in my life as you can use them also. We're going to go through this pretty quickly. This is meant to be an hour presentation, so bear with me. The basics. Number 1, persuasion is not manipulation. Persuasion is the art and science of getting people to do things that are in their best interest and your own best interest. Number 2, persuade the persuadable. Everybody is persuadable, but not at any given time. And so if you think of a political campaign, when you're running for office, you don't try to persuade Republicans if you're a Democrat, and you don't really try to persuade Democrats if you're a Republican. You go for that middle ground. And in the end, there's about 10% of the voting population that decides who's the leader of the free world. And the same principles that we apply in a public campaign for the highest office in the land is the basics of how we understand persuasion, which is start with those groups of people that are persuadable. And based upon timing and context, everybody's persuadable at some time. Next, the most important rule of persuasion is that context and timing make all the difference. That's what sets up someone being allowed to be persuaded. So if you think of, even just a simple example, this lion in the jungle would rip this person's head off. But based on the right context and based on the right timing, someone can put their head safely in this lion's head and be totally fine. It's the same principle also of how a magician works with misdirection. He or she's going to get you to believe that a trick's happening because they control the context and the timing. It's also why stage hypnosis shows work. So I would go into audiences probably twice as big as this, and I'd pull 10 people up on stage. And within 15 minutes, I'd have the biggest, burliest guy think that he was giving birth to this baby, and he'd be taking a little pink teddy bear and trying to breastfeed it in front of all of these people in the crowd. But that would not work if I just stood outside some supermarket and was like, hey, who wants to get hypnotized? It worked because the context was that people are coming to a stage hypnosis show, so they're expecting something like that to happen. Rule number 4, you have to be interested to be able to be persuaded. And one of the biggest mistakes that we all make is that we think that people are interested in the things when they're saying, when you know what? They don't give a fuck what we're talking about because we're talking about ourselves. And what's the one thing everybody most cares about? Themselves. And if you learn to talk to people about them and what they want and what they need and what they're going to get, you're always going to have their captive attention. All right, let's go into the general rules. Reciprocity compels. It is based on evolutionary DNA that we have grown, survived, and flourished as a species by helping one another out. And if I do my best friend Ben a favor, he's going to feel compelled to return that favor to me. But the trick is that you can use reciprocity disproportionately in your favor. So for example, there are lots of folks that I'll reach out to try to get some kind of business deal done. And they don't know me, they may not want to respond, it's too busy, it's too much work. And one of the things that we've done is over the last 2 years, I've hosted a dinner where I get together a group of CEOs, and I don't even pay for this. I have some law firm or accounting firm pay for the dinner. But I invite them there. I control the context. There are about 10 out of the 20 people there I already know. They're saying, oh, this is so great. Jason and Doc Sock are so wonderful. And at the end of that dinner, that simple meal, which at the end of the day probably costs $50 to $100 that I didn't even pay for, will compel that person that, given a different set of circumstances, would not even return my email, go to such lengths to take their own time, their own effort to help me out because they feel they want to repay that favor. And by doing lots of things to help other people out, especially if you do without expectation, you'll be able to leverage it in the future to get them to do something for you that's disproportionately in your favor to what you did for them. Persistency pays. My absolute favorite quote about this is a long list of Abraham Lincoln's trials before he became president. And he lost election 8 times. He had 2 businesses failed. He went crazy. He won 2 elections before he ever became president of the United States, and in that time lost 8 elections. Compliment sincerely. And the trick of it is not to be a sycophant and to compliment people sincerely. And the things that you most want to compliment people for are the things that they have the biggest insecurities about. So you don't compliment the hot girl on being hot, you compliment her on being smart. You don't compliment the nerdy guy on being inventive, you compliment him on being handsome. And ask yourselves and really think, how many compliments in the course of a day do you give away? Because the absolute most persuasive people sincerely find a way to compliment others on an ongoing, consistent basis. Set expectations. This goes back to controlling the context and the timing. Right? This whole movie, Life is Beautiful, is a story about a kid that's growing up in the Holocaust in concentration camps, but his father shields him from all of that by setting expectations. One of the things that I always try to do with my board is if I think that we're going to achieve a certain result, if I say, hey, this is the result that we're going to get for how much money we're going to make in 2011, whatever I think that number is going to be, I always tell them it's going to be 20% less. Because I'm going to make damn sure that I'm going to under-promise and over-deliver. And you know what? They even know that I'm doing that. But the mere fact that when we have that board meeting again at the end of the year and I say, okay, well, we said we were going to make X, but we really made X plus 20%, consistently leaves them with a feeling that we're doing a better job than if I had merely done the opposite and said, well, we're going to do more and under-delivered on that promise. Don't assume. The best sales advice I ever got was don't ever make an assumption of what someone can or cannot pay for. Don't put your judgments on other people. So when you're going for a sale or you're talking to a customer, you may feel like, they may tell you like, oh, I don't have the money, I don't have the time. You know what? People who don't have money find money for the things they want. If you believe in your product, if you believe in your service, offer it up. And don't make an assumption of what someone needs or doesn't need. Let them make that decision. Create scarcity. One of my favorite examples of this, and no object other than basic necessities. Once you have your food to keep you satisfied and nourished, once you have your shelter, really no object has value other than what its relative worth in comparison to what people want. And the object that's scarce always has the most value. And one of my just simplest favorite stories about this is for those of us that are still single or not married, you'll sometimes you'll go and you'll get a girl's number at a bar and maybe you're drunk or buzzed and you don't even like her, you're not into her, okay? And it could be reversed, be the girl that gets the guy's number. And maybe it's a couple days later and you're sitting around, you're bored and you're lonely and you text this person, you're like, hey, what are you up to? And as soon as you send this text, you feel like a total douche. You're like, why'd I even send this? I don't want to talk to this girl. I hope she never calls me. I don't want to hear from her. Ugh. And you feel disgusting. And then 10 minutes goes by, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and this girl's not texting you back. And this person that 3 hours ago you didn't even want to have to talk to, you felt like you were doing her a favor by texting her, you're wondering, why the fuzz is she not texting me back? What's going on here? And then invariably, as soon as she texts back, you're like, I don't want to talk to her. I don't want to hear from this person. Because what was scarce in one moment all of a sudden becomes abundant. Create urgency. When we were going to do our venture deal 3.5 years ago, I had to pitch dozens and dozens of VCs. And it wasn't until we got the first term sheet that then 4 other VCs immediately put in an offer to say, hey, come fly out for a partners meeting. We're going to match that term sheet. There was no urgency created around our deal until there was scarcity around it. And the most successful people that I know and the most persuasive people that I know have a sense of urgency that is heightened and always feels like if they don't do it and get it now, they're not going to have it. And now, I want it now, where you're going to get it now, is a very powerful concept. Images matter. One of my favorite examples of this is actually a bit that my best friend Ben does that I think he originally got from me. But you know these pharmaceutical commercials, right? Remember back in the day, like they would tell you all the bad things that could happen. It did in that shady voice where it would talk really fast, like, and Zoloft could cause da 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 da. And you heard that, you're like, oh, some shady shit's happening. What do they do now? Now they have like people playing in forests and running, and they're in Hawaii, and they're eating big plates of food. And someone very calmly says, this pill could cause your liver to explode. You're going to get a burning sensation in the places you don't want burning sensations, and you'll most likely die. But you see this image of people that are happy and enjoying themselves, and that's all you pay attention to. Images matter when we try to persuade others. Truth tell. I've had this whole catchphrase I used to call truth sermon. There's 2 fables I like the best. There's one fable that the overall point of truth telling is we're so accustomed to people telling us what we want to hear and being PC and not cutting to the point, but sometimes you persuade people by telling them the things about themselves that nobody else will. And the most simple example of this is the emperor has no clothes. Every single person in that crowd was a sycophant. Oh, the emperor's clothes are amazing, they're wonderful, they're incredible, as he paraded around totally naked. And it wasn't until that one child truth told and said, the emperor has no clothes, that everybody started laughing and jeering. And that one poignant way of making a truth-telling statement immediately persuaded everybody to switch their opinions and belief. Build rapport. We like people who we're like. That means if I have a certain kind of car and my wife has certain tastes and I live in a certain area, people that have those same interests I like. But there's also a whole set of unconscious behaviors and patterns that we have. How we speak, how we hold ourselves, our cadence, how we talk. And there's a principle of neuro-linguistic programming called matching and mirroring, that when you're in a one-on-one interaction with somebody, you actually match the speed and pace at which they talk. You hold yourself the way they hold themselves. And you build a sense of rapport where unconsciously someone will feel like, I like this person. And in that state of rapport, they're more apt to being persuaded. Let's talk about the personal skills. Behavioral flexibility gives you control. It's not the person who's the most powerful in the situation that has control. It's the person with the most flexibility. And for any of you that have children, you know this. Because all a parent has is, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. But the kid's going to cry. They're going to bargain. They're going to make promises. They're going to pout. They're going to turn on the charm. They're going to try every single behavior to get the end result that they want. And most often they win not because they have the power in the situation, but because they have the most behavioral flexibility. Learn to transfer energy to others. Have you ever been talking to somebody and you just kind of feel like they don't understand what's going on? You literally feel drained of energy. Like the next word you have to say is like a brick on your mouth that you have to talk about it. Versus other times when people are empathetic and they give you eye contact and they reiterate the things you're saying and they touch you. If you learn to transfer energy to others, you can much more easily persuade them. Communicating clearly is key. And the best person at this that I remember is Ronald Reagan. And I would watch his speeches. My mom would pull me aside and say, you've got to watch how this person talks, Jason. And if you can't explain your idea or concept to a 5th grader and have that 5th grader relay it to his or her friends and have it come back and make sense to you, you're explaining it in too complicated a way. That's why Fox News works. Being prepared gives you the advantage. There's a fantastic book called Talent is Overrated, saying that the most genius people in the world, the Mozarts, Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, aren't as talented as you actually think. They have a disciplined and systematic approach to practice and being prepared that makes them excellent. And it's that preparation that will always make us more persuasive. Detach and stay calm in conflict. You know who would I want to have with me in the biggest fight or conflict or national disaster? Is Spock from Star Trek. Because while everyone else was freaking out, that kind of clear-headedness is what I think is going to help persuade others and make sure you're in the right situation. Use anger purposefully. So anger is very powerful, but if you use it out of emotion, then all you're doing is exercising a loss of self-control and trying to regain that. But where you're willing to use anger where others are not, often gives you the advantage, because most people don't want to be in situations of a lot of conflict. And if you're willing to able to show and demonstrate that you're okay with a higher level of conflict than they are, you can often persuade them in an instance. And finally, and most importantly, confidence and certainty. There is no quality, there is no trait, there is no behavior that is as addictive and as much of an aphrodisiac as confidence and certainty. And to the extent that we have confidence and certainty in ourselves, even when there's not any external proof or belief to say that we should, and we can extend that certainty to others, we will always be able to persuade others to do the things that are in their best interest and also get what we want in return. And those are the 21 golden rules of how to persuade people. Thanks.